Hello, this is Brian with the Bad Manners Podcast, and I'm going to be reacting to a video entitled Freiren and the Politics of Deception. The main reason I'm reacting to this video is a man I very much respect, Nick Freitas, also reacted to it. And he calls it the left's most effective tactic, but rather spoiling myself and my opinion by watching his first. I want to give a raw reaction to it now, so that when I watch his, I can try to reconcile what I think versus what he thinks. So let's get into it.
Over the last year, something really strange has happened. The same political movement that spent a decade telling us that the Founding Fathers were villains, our Constitution was structurally racist, and America itself was an illegitimate white settler colonial state built on genocide and slavery, has now suddenly rediscovered a deep reverence for pretty much all of these things. The left has gone all in on embracing this aesthetic. They dress themselves up as patriots and cosplay as the Founding Fathers while attending protests under the tagline, "No Kings." And many on the right are just staring at this, completely dumbfounded. Didn't we just spend the last 10 years watching these same people essentially declare total war on the American mythos? All of us remember the cultural revolution that was the Great Awakening. We all lived through the 1619 Project, the tearing down of statues and monuments, the incessant lecturing that America was never great to begin with.
Before he continues, I'm already generating this hypothesis that the reason the left can engage in this blatant form of hypocrisy is they want to cultivate in people both an understanding that American history is a bad thing and to be negatively understood, and then try to pepper that with a little bit of appreciation for, well, there was some good, but it's only good in those specific areas that the left deems acceptable. So it's acceptable to say no kings and then suddenly adorn oneself with the trappings of early Americana. It's just when it comes to anything outside that, they'll immediately go back to, no, but the rest is horrible and we need to destroy all of it. But let's see if I'm correct.
The very public character assassination attempts, and several of them were quite successful, against everyone from astrophysicists to CEOs. The relentless, personal, and ruthless attacks on white men for being the root of all evil in the world. The explicit attempt to shut them out of all institutions and elite career pathways. We were told there was nothing to celebrate about this country, and that its only hope for salvation would be to hand everything over to the very people who framed their hatred for us as a universal moral imperative. So what exactly are we supposed to believe? That the Founding Fathers were irredeemably evil in 2020, but now they're sacred guardians of liberty to invoke against the current occupant in the White House? Why does it seem like there's a sizable chunk of the political divide who expects us to accept their appeal to things they themselves were trying to tear down just a few years ago? I think you know where I'm going with this. You've already seen the title of this video. At the same time, there's been this huge blow-up over to what degree the American founding can be used as a political football by one.
Given the title of the video has Freiren in it, and within it, the demons have a habit of saying whatever will further their cause as a weapon against anybody that's not a demon. I'm going to bet that this is simply a case of the left doing anything that they believe will further entrench their cause of acquiring power. But let's see.
One side who openly hates this country. There's been a similar cultural battle over an anime that came out just a few years ago, called Freiren, Beyond Journey's End. A handful of left-wing anime fans have argued that, like every other cultural icon of the last decade, Freiren obviously belongs to them. But there's just one problem. Freiren is as close to being explicitly right-wing as any anime possibly could be. And it's right-wing in a way that explains virtually everything that's happening to American politics at the moment. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it, here's what you need to know about the world of Freiren. In this world, demons exist, and they've evolved a very specific survival strategy. They look almost exactly like humans. They have the same bodies, they have the same faces, they even speak with the same voices. The only thing that really gives them away are the small horns on their head. And you've got to remember, these things have spent centuries studying human beings and learning how to blend into society. They've picked up human speech and behavioral patterns, but none of it's real. The whole thing is a performance. It's a manipulative play with one purpose and one purpose only: to weasel their way into a position close enough to do what they actually came to do, which is to eat the humans themselves.
It definitely sounds like I was on the right track. In the case of leftists, they will say and do anything that further entrenches or enhances their power of social control. Because for the left, power is everything. The corollary would be that for the demons, survival of their kind is everything. So they'll do anything to humans toward that end.
And in one of the most memorable scenes of the first season, Freiren's party encounters a demon that has taken the form of a young girl. Now, I want you to pay close attention to what happens next. The human hero of this party, Himmel, simply can't bring himself to strike this demon down, even after it had just murdered and eaten another child. From Himmel's perspective, all that he sees is a small and frightened girl, not a monster with no compassion for its victims. And so he just can't do it. He can't swing his sword and strike this demon down because it goes against his own principles, his own moral compass, really his entire worldview. What happens next is that the village chieftain steps forward and offers to take the demon in as one of his own. He basically promises to raise it as a human and to show it love and compassion.
The author of this video is developing a very, very strong case for the similarity between the left and their behavior and the interactions with the right. What ends up happening is when leftists are not in position of power or control and they're in a position of weakness, they appeal to the principles that people on the right hold. And because the people on the right hold these principles, they are more than willing to exercise them because they believe it to be the right thing. And there's this kind of belief that in exercising those principles, you are doing a great good. Unfortunately, treating somebody that does not have your good intent, your well-being in mind, or even is openly or secretly pursuing your destruction, is ultimately doing a disservice to you and all those people you care for. Because a leftist is seeking your disenfranchisement and the dissolution of any power you formerly possessed. If they are able to come to a position in which they can exert power and control, your principles will be of no consequence in their mind. Because their singular goal is to control the levers of power. And toward that end, anything deemed useful, even if there's some hypocrisy that is evident in the courses they take, is something they are going to employ. But if you come to fundamentally understand their nature for what they are and what is motivating all of their behavior, you can begin to treat them appropriately.
But in doing so, he's playing right into the demon's hands. It has no interest in integrating into human society or reforming itself along humanity's moral order.
Leftists have no interest in integrating themselves into traditional American society. If you listen to them, they are quite clear that they view it to be an evil, that it needs to be destroyed and replaced with something else, and that is what they are working towards. They will only begin to show that they're not for those things if they believe they're not secure enough in their position to pursue that line. So leftists are adaptable, but it takes a certain understanding of their nature and their ideology that motivates them to begin to be able to combat them effectively.
All it's interested in is manipulating the emotions and principles of the humans around it in order to continue killing.
The fact the author mentioned principles, fantastic, because that is ultimately what it goes to. I can't remember where it's from. I think it's from Dune. I think I've also heard it referenced in relation to Calvin and Hobbes. But it's something to the effect that when I am not in power, I plead for you to use your principles because it benefits me. When I am in power, I deny those principles because it is not of use to me. And effectively, it's the same sentiment where it's a zero-sum game for power, and anything else is irrelevant.
And so, tragically, the same principles that drove this family to open up their home ultimately result in the village chieftain being killed, his homestead burned to the ground, and his daughter nearly suffering the same fate as the first child that Himmel failed to avenge. Finally, Freiren steps forward to do what Himmel couldn't. And in this moment, we learn everything we need to know about the world of Freiren. The demon cries out yet again for a mother it doesn't even have. And when Freiren presses it on it, it finally admits that it's simply a magic word that keeps people from killing them. As Freiren herself explains,
奴らにとっての言葉は人類を欺く術だ。
The point here is that demons use human empathy and morality to their own advantage, despite never adhering to those moral principles themselves. The entire thing is a trick, designed to cause what would otherwise be the demon's enemies from recognizing themselves as such. This is why I said earlier that Freiren is deeply right-wing, so much so that there's an entire collection of memes pointing this fact out. And this one scene from a Japanese anime perfectly explains the current state of American politics today. I've summarized the phenomenon here.
Conservatives win an election, leftists appeal to the Constitution, the rule of law, Christianity, and the Founding Fathers to ensure that conservatives never act against them. Absolutely. You see this with... I can't remember the name of the organization off the top of my head, but they were very, very ardent in defending free speech throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s when leftists or a far-left ideology wasn't as dominant. And then in more recent times, they have flipped to having the perspective that, hate speech is not free speech. And they do that for the reasons I mentioned earlier. They will use your principles against you if it helps them to advance their cause. But the moment they come into power, they do not act in accordance with those principles at all. One of the most pervasive tools that I've witnessed in my own life of leftists doing that is every time you see an atheist or a leftist try to appeal to a Christian using the scriptures when they themselves do not believe in those scriptures at all, because they're hoping that by appealing to them they can get you to do what they want, or that you'll just simply stop resisting them. So this is a behavior that leftists have been demonstrating for decades now. And because of the more conservative inclination to treat all people approximately the same way, to give people the benefit of the doubt, it's extraordinarily effective. Because you want to believe in the integrity of your countrymen and to believe that they too share your best interests and they're looking out for you just as you're looking out for them. But the truth is, they're not at all, and they never were. Their ideology is their God, and all their actions are in service to their God, and their God is power.
In a tweet that ultimately inspired this entire video. This has been the story of American politics for years, arguably decades even. The Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers.
He is correct when it goes back decades. It's one of the reasons that communists would escape being expelled from the country altogether, because they would cite free speech, even though they're obviously endorsing an ideology that is anathema to anything that traditional Americans would find appropriate. So, yeah, it goes back to easily the 60s, but even into the 50s.
Checks and balances, federalism, the founders' vision for this entire country. All of these things are generational commitments on the right. We see them as essential elements to who we are as Americans. They have to be honored and defended, even when doing so is painful, and even when honoring them means sometimes losing.
Everything he described is the course of action that should naturally be adhered to when you have a people that share a common culture and everybody's agreeing to operate within what is understood as acceptable within that culture. And for most of American history, there was widespread cultural hegemony. And in that hegemony, everybody had a general understanding of what appropriate behavior was, morals, ethics, etc. And yeah, you can afford losses within that framework. However, what we understand as the left and right 100 years ago is wildly different from what occurs today. What occurs today is a people that do not have a common consensus on anything at all. They can't even agree whether this country is a good thing. So in that absence of consensus regarding anything, if one side continues to adhere to those principles and the other side is using them as a bludgeon to destroy everything that side stands for, then to continue to adhere to that principle becomes the pursuit of your own self-destruction. And it is a very effective tool of the left. But it is going to, if conservative Americans are to survive at all, it is going to produce a variation of conservative Americans that become extraordinarily intolerant of certain things, and all things leftists would fall under that umbrella. It's not necessarily a desirable societal outcome. It would effectively be kind of an ideological purging, but it would at least provide the opportunity for that people to survive. Because survival is frequently an ugly thing. Just as a kind of example, you've got the stories of the Donner Party. They get trapped in the mountains. Obviously, cannibalism is the ultimate human taboo, but in the pursuit of survival, it did occur. So it's one of those things of sometimes an evil thing is necessary for survival in the end. So the uglier that society gets, the more likely it is humans will engage in horrible behaviors or behaviors that were formerly unthinkable just to come out the other side in one piece. So it is dangerous to allow this situation to occur in the first place, but it could well get worse.
But this is exactly why the left appeals to these things. Even if they don't fully understand the reason why, they do understand that these things carry an almost mythic power in the minds of conservatives. And it's a mythic power they're all too happy to exploit when it suits them. Perhaps there's no better recent example of this than this year's Democrat State of the Union rebuttal. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger deliberately chose to deliver it from the chamber of North America's oldest legislative body in Williamsburg, just a few miles from the site of the first English colony at Jamestown and the birth of America's independence at Yorktown. And in this speech, what did we see? Explicit references to the Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, invoking the story of America's independence from tyranny. Direct appeals to
what our founders envisioned.
Spanberger even went so far as to quote George Washington and regurgitate the old conservative adage about law and order, yet somehow twist it into an attack on ICE, even after an illegal migrant from Sierra Leone with
the idea that any leftist politician in the United States in any way venerates the founding fathers of this country must be dismissed, because nothing in their ideology demonstrates that they are grounded in reality or care about American people. Their actions, in fact, consistently demonstrate, if you look at the Trump State of the Union address, that they are interested more in the plight of foreigners than they are of anybody that's American. All they really want is to ensure a structure in which they can retain their positions of power and influence. And yeah, it's very effective that they're using appeals to the common American mythos that used to be venerated by all. But I think, thankfully, conservatives are waking up to the reality that the lefts feel no affinity for American historical practices. They, in fact, look down on them because slavery existed. But even if you excuse slavery, they choose to view American history through the prism of, well, the white man was just oppressing everyone, and everybody was suffering, but the white man who was having a jolly old time and life was great. For him only. So now I have some insight into why Nick Freitas has a video saying this is the left's most effective tactic. He is probably correct on that point.
30 prior arrests, stabbed a woman at a bus stop in Northern Virginia. Keep in mind, all of this was happening at the same time the Democratic Party in the state she governs is advancing bills to terminate Virginia's cooperation agreements with ICE, limit the ability of law enforcement to
As an amusing aside, the state of Virginia resisting the federal government would not be new.
share information with federal immigration agents, ban immigration arrests near courthouses, and turn schools into ICE-free zones. And the same illegal alien who stabbed a woman to death at a bus stop in Northern Virginia, that all happened literally the day before her speech. And a week later, Spanberger refused to hand him over to ICE for deportation.
Let's pause and reflect on that for a moment. This is a lady that in the Democratic rebuttal to the State of the Union made all kinds of appeals to the founding fathers of this country. If the founding fathers could view into the future and they see that you have foreign nationals here killing American citizens, and the government that was here was impeding the punishment of said criminal, they would probably try to step through that window into time in the future and start just killing everybody that they thought was okay with that. It is not something the founders of the country would tolerate even slightly. You even fast forward that past the founders into the people that settled the West. These were people that would hang you if you stole a horse. Do you think they would in any way tolerate foreign nationals coming here and killing American citizens? Not only would they punish that person, they would certainly hang every judge and every person that tried to prevent the authorities from punishing that person. So it is insanity that the left thinks that the right will still play into their game of falling for their appeals to the common American mythos.
Does she believe this is what the founders would have wanted? Illegal migrants from another continent coming here and killing Americans? How do you stand there in the birthplace of America, quote the founding fathers, and then go home and do everything in your power to govern in a way that would horrify them?
Those of us that are conservatives, because of our veneration for America's past and the people that built this country into the greatest on earth, we view those men through the light that we think they were wise. They were enlightened, they were competent, and they were capable. That the actions they took were good actions. Because of that, we strive to emulate those practices. Because by emulating that which worked to achieve success for them, and that we are their posterity, we are attempting to carry that success forward. We value it, treasure it, and want to pass it on to future generations because it all resonates with us on a deeply fundamental level. The left feels none of that. Rather than thinking these were enlightened, competent, capable men, they view them as uniformly evil because of the evils of slavery. And because slavery happened, it means that everything else they did possessed a degree of inherent evil as well. So it doesn't surprise me that they can go and try to quote them for the same reason that a leftist or an atheist will attempt to quote Jesus or the apostles to Christians. There is no actual integrity in what they're saying. They simply want you to fall in line with their desires. There is no debate to be had with people that lack integrity. For similar reasons, it's the reason that debating with a Muslim is mostly a waste of time. They're under no compulsion to be honest to you, so whatever they say, who knows whether it's true or not. Debate that is important or references to your past or your history or anything that's important to you should only be taken serious when it comes from people that are looking out for your best interest. If they're looking out for their self-interest, they should be shunned.
The answer, of course, is that she isn't confused, and she's not being inconsistent. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's invoking the things she knows conservatives hold sacred, because invoking them constrains conservative action. The moment her party is back in power and the Constitution becomes an obstacle rather than a shield, it will stop being a sacred document and go back to being a relic of white supremacy, just like it did before. And this gets to the fundamental problem at the heart of American politics right now. To conservatives, the Constitution is a civic Bible. It's the cornerstone of America's identity. It's the guarantor of liberty for its people, and the crowning achievement of our country's contribution to political philosophy. But to the left, the Constitution is something else entirely. They don't appeal to the Constitution because they believe in it. They appeal to the Constitution because you do. To the left, the Constitution is at best just a procedural tool to invoke when it gets you what you want.
I think for the left, the Constitution mostly serves as an obstacle to the things they want to accomplish. As he pointed out, they only cite it if it helps to prevent them from being stamped out of existence.
And at worst, it's a founding document of white supremacy written by white patriarchal slave owners to protect a system of oppression that progressives are determined to tear down, sometimes quite literally. It's the political equivalent of that same survival mechanism that demons have in the world of Freiren, which might conveniently explain why a subset of the left openly identifies with them in online discourse. But of course, these two views are not compatible. There's no political system on Earth, no matter how well written or long-lasting it may be, that can survive a dynamic where one side treats its founding principles as a bedrock of civilization and the other treats them as a means to deceive their enemies.
He is correct. And just that statement of his alone, please like, follow, subscribe, comment to him. That is a fantastic point. Also, I've mentioned Nick Freitas because of him is the reason I'm watching this video and reacting to it right now. Like, follow, subscribe, and comment to his work as well. I have no doubt both men are men that I would love to meet and shake the hands of. The left is incompatible with anything that people that are traditionally American adhere to. So if you are a traditional American that wants to move forward in advancing American society as you understand it and want it to be, you must understand that the left is an implacable enemy. They are not your countrymen, even if they come from bloodlines similar to your own. They do not desire your well-being, safety, success, or prosperity. All they desire is to fulfill their lust for power and the vision that their ideology has for the world. Typically, their ideology is in line with some flavor of communism. But regardless of where their ideology actually leads them, they will not work alongside you to make a better world because they despise everything you stand for.
So what does this all teach us? Well, for years now, I would argue that almost everyone on the right has been able to feel this, even if they've struggled to put it into words. The left has spent a long time essentially abusing deeply held conservative principles in order to force them into situations that actively harms them.
I don't know if he's going to touch on it in the closing moments, but truly, the earliest version of this has always been leftists quoting the Bible at Christians. Because if they can get that Christian to in any way cede ground or give credence to the idea that that leftist has a point, then the leftist gets a step closer to achieving whatever their objective is. It's one of the reasons that engaging in religious discussions with people you know are not religious or despise religion is a futile waste of time. They're not acting in good faith. They do not actually want to see you become more enlightened or move your life forward. It is entirely for their self-aggrandization.
And they've just expected to keep getting away with this as long as they can string together the right magic words. That's precisely what the demon does in Freiren. It doesn't need to overpower Himmel. It just needs him to hesitate and to doubt whether he's looking at an enemy at all. But this spell only has power over someone who believes in it. And this is what the right has been painfully slow to come to terms with. The Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, the founders' vision for America, none of these things came first. The revolution did. The rules and procedures only came after the question was settled as to who this country belonged to and what overarching vision would govern it. Right now, there's a new battle being waged over those first-order questions. And recognizing this isn't an act of cynicism or an abandonment of principle. To go back to the Freiren analogy for just a moment, when she strikes the demon down, does she somehow stop protecting the humans she cares about? Does she become the demon herself? No. She just stops pretending that extending mercy to something that will use that mercy to keep killing is synonymous with being merciful itself. Ultimately, the right...
It sounds like he's echoing some version of mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. You are betraying those people like you that share your beliefs if you are giving any measure of charity or consideration to those people that would pursue your destruction. It becomes a purely practical matter. So, using what he was showing as an example, when you kill that demon, you are being merciful to the people you care about. Or in the case of if you're a conservative American, by shunning leftists, refusing to cede any of their points, and generally seeking their disenfranchisement, you are showing mercy to the people like you. Because by virtue of the ideology that they pursue, they are not like you, and they do not want to be like you. They want something very different to the things that you cherish and hold dear.
Right doesn't need to stop believing in the Constitution or the rule of law. It just needs to stop extending these principles in a universal, automatic, and good faith manner to the very forces that have made it clear that they'll invoke them when convenient and discard them when they're not. And doing so isn't a betrayal of what the founders built or stood for. It's actually the only way any of it can possibly survive.
That was a fantastic video. Probably the shortest video that I have thought was fantastic in a long time. I have seen references to this in various places. I think I've even seen a meme on the religious angle that I discussed, where it's something of like a smug leftist saying, let me explain, how your religious beliefs actually work, or something like that. It is true that you don't have to abandon these universal principles in order to deal with leftists. But when he touched on the fact that the revolution came first before all these other considerations, it does underscore that the only way your beliefs, traditions, and practices can be perpetuated is if you can violently defend them. Because anything we understand as a human right, or any complex structure in society that humans erect, they are erected on at least one abstract concept. And humans engage in reification of those concepts by reaching a consensus on how they're going to function and the purpose they'll serve within society. And it will continue doing so long as it can be defended. But when you begin to deal with outside parties that want to either corrupt or destroy those things that were erected for a specific purpose, you need to be able to, if necessary, violently hold the line. Thankfully, up to this point, we don't really have open sectarian violence, but that's chiefly because a good amount of the conflict stems from intra-racial conflict between whites. You have the white leftists that hate everything the country stands for, and then you have white conservatives who are on the other side of that coin. However, that's things as they are now. There's a reason the leftists are in favor of extraordinarily high numbers of immigration, because if they can get immigrants to align themselves with those leftist values and the number of conservative Americans shrink, that balance of power begins to shift. And at that point, violence begins to appear more desirable, because leftists have never sworn off violence. And because of that understanding, if they get enough power, it becomes an open possibility. So the right needs to be wary that to some extent it's a demographics game, it's a numbers game, and your traditions and beliefs are only going to persist in society if they can be defended. It's one of the reasons that you'll find a number of people are keenly aware of why so many deportations need to occur. Because on a long enough timeline, if that does not happen, the numbers will tilt, and you'll no longer be able to take the nonviolent discourse for granted. But that's just my thoughts on it. If you like anything I had to say, like, comment, subscribe to me. I really hope that if somebody does comment, it's something interesting, because I'm always open to shifting my perspective on various things. You guys have a great night.